Greetings, class. This is the article I had for you online, and it really wasn't working the way I wanted, so I'm making a short video to help you out. The article is called Project C by Leslie Anderson Morales. It says, in 1963 is the heading. It says, when George Wallace, the newly elected white governor of Alabama, took office in 1963, he declared, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Like Wallace, many officials in the South spoke openly of white supremacy and black inferiority, and one of the most segregated cities in the nation was Birmingham, Alabama. All right, so here they're talking about segregation. Segregation is the separation of people based off of race or color. So here, black and white people were segregated or separated in places in Alabama. Back to the story. Nearly 40% of its population was African American, and most, if not all, were poor. Because of local news and traditions, only a fraction of them were registered to vote. Acts of violence were used to intimidate black citizens. Between 1957 and 1963, more than 18 bombings and 15 cross burnings had occurred in the African American property. The city had earned the nickname Bombingham. Birmingham civil rights activists had created the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights of 1956. They elected Reverend Fred L. Shuttlesworth as its president. A strong, fiery leader, Shuttlesworth refused to compromise on African American rights. In the spring of 1963, he invited the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to make Birmingham the site of its next major campaign. Organizers planned an economic boycott of a white business, which discriminated against black customers and workers. Okay, so a boycott means you're going to stop doing something or going to a certain place because of what you believe. When they picked the Easter season when retail sales were normally high. They outlined a secret strategy for Project C. The C was for confrontation. The idea was to coordinate a massive direct action, nonviolent protest. Stage 1 began on April 3rd with a sit-in in downtown lunch counters. Stage 2 involved groups of marchers emerging from the 16th Street Church and getting arrested while engaged in forms of protest. Marches, boycotts, and arrests went on for days. On April 10th, Birmingham's Commissioner for Public Safety, T. Eugene Bull O'Connor, secured a state injunction prohibiting demonstrations. 2 days later, a group of 50 marchers set out anyways. They were arrested. The plan's most controversial stage involved young people. On May 2nd, more than 1,000 marchers ages 6 to 18 set out from the 16th Street Church. Connor jailed more than 900 of them. The next day, another 1,000 people marched, but the jails were still full from the day before, and Connor had no place to hold more protesters. He decided to disperse the crowd another way. Connor ordered police dog units to attack young marchers at the Kelly Ingram Park. Pandemonium broke out. Firemen joined the blasting high-pressure washer from fire hoses that ripped clothing and rolled small children down the street. Within a half hour, the demonstration was over, but that day, the national news coverage showed the scenes of Birmingham's violent treatment of the young protesters. Viewers and readers across the country were disgusted at police brutality. On May 6th, small groups of 20 to 50 protesters filed out of the 16th Street Church for more than an hour. The next day, thousands of people flooded the downtown area at noon. They staged sit-ins and pickets in major stores. Connor used an armored police tank to force demonstrators back into the park. There they faced vicious policemen, snarling dogs, and high-pressure fire hoses. The two sides eventually announced a compromise in mid-May. Certain facilities would be desegregated, so no longer segregated. More employment opportunities would be available to black people. A biracial committee would explore further ways to ensure equality and make reforms. Project C and the press coverage reinvigorated the civil rights movement. Its massive nonviolent effort proved that all people, including children and the working poor, had roles to play in the civil rights struggle. Did you know that Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the marchers arrested on April 12th? He was put in solitary confinement, where he wrote his famous letter from Birmingham jail. The letter defended the moral right to resist unjust laws. Okay, this is an informational article, so if you notice, it also has a caption with a picture. So the picture here says, Protesters in Birmingham, Alabama, 1963. The caption says, a 17-year-old civil rights demonstrator defying an anti-parade ordinance of Birmingham, Alabama, is attacked by a police dog on May 3rd, 1963. On the afternoon of May 4th, 1963, during a meeting at the White House with members of a political group, President Kennedy discussed this photo, which had appeared on the front page of that day's New York Times. All right, this is the article. Once you've finished reading the article, I want you to go back over it and I want you to fill out this form. I want you to find one piece of text that stands out to you. So one sentence from the, or sentence or two from the article that just made you go, wow. And then I want you to make two connections. Like, I think this about that text. I wonder, or I was really surprised. And then in the last box, I want you to give me 3 predictions. So you can make a prediction. I think this might happen in the Watsons. I want you to make a text-to-text connection. As you see, this article was happening in 1963. Our book takes place in 1963. This article has events that are happening in Birmingham, Alabama, and our book is about to head to our... All right, so I do need you to give me some predictions, connections to the text, since the book takes place in 1963, and the setting is about to change to Birmingham, Alabama. You might say something about, remind you of something you read, because on page 122 of the Watsons, they mention stuff about going on in the news, and on page 119, they talk about the TV and things they'd seen happening in Birmingham. You might make a prediction of what you think might happen next in the novel as they head to Birmingham, Alabama. And you might even say that they are what both the article and our novel have talked about in regards to prejudice and segregation. All right, fill out your stuff and get started.